Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to OSA Live, because that's right, it is Tuesday, it's 7:15, and I'm here with Ernie. I'm live at Wakefield. Ernie's live from Coventry, and tonight, what are we talking about, Ernie?
We're going to talk about how reef lighting has changed over the years and what's the best setup you can possibly use for your tank nowadays. Because a lot of us
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking reef lighting. Peter, hit that intro, baby. Woo! Now, since Ernie has all the experiences, because he's experienced all those years of lighting, Ernie, what are we starting with?
We're going to go way back in time. People wonder why there wasn't lighting controversies way back when. It's because there weren't any lights. My first saltwater tank was actually running a T8. It's 6500K. It's basically a plant light.
Well, how long ago was that? What year was that? Do you remember?
89.
Okay.
And then these wonderful little things called compact fluorescents came along. Gave you much better spectrum, much better coverage. They worked really well. They weren't around all that long because the T5 VHOs came out at about the same time as the awesome metal halides came around. Once again, not too many choices out there. Your T5s, you had a choice of 5, 6 different color bulbs. In the beginning, halides were once again 6500K. There's beautiful, bright yellow light that grew corals, but also grew algae like crazy. As time went on, the 20Ks came out, much better. The downside to the metal halides, and the reason they're really not so prolific in the hobby anymore, it was basically putting a street lamp over your aquarium. Huge heat issues. You'd burn yourself all the time bouncing into them. You have to replace the bulbs every 6 months. Got very costly. They had very large ballasts. They got very hot. All in all, in my opinion, still the best looking light over a saltwater aquarium is a 20K metal halide. But they're just not that practical anymore. That's where the LEDs come into play.
Now, we had T5s after the metal halides, though, right?
They were around at the same time. T5s are still going.
Yep.
T5s give you great coverage. The one thing T5s don't give you is they give you zero shimmer. A lot of us really enjoy that shimmer look because it looks natural. A T5 is a very flat light. It's like looking at an old school freshwater aquarium. You look at it, it's lit up, but it's a flat light. There's no shimmer to it. T5s are still in use very heavily now. They're just in combination with the LEDs.
Which way are you think for? Now, I got to tell you guys, I've seen some pretty incredible growth on metal halides and T5s. And I'll give you the first one. I'm all in on LEDs. Like, I'm all in on LEDs. But I got to tell you, Chris Kaz, him and I argued for a long time about T5 growth. And I was like, no way. And he made me 80. I tell you, I was really impressed with how well the T5s actually did, but nothing colors them up like an LED.
They don't shadow. You don't get any shadowing with T5. It's a complete light. The light gets all around your corals and it penetrates everywhere.
On any of the LEDs, like, do you have a certain? What would you say is the first LEDs that you got into?
The first LED I personally used was a Current USA.
Yep. I think, you know what? It's crazy you say that. I feel like so many people do that, right? Either they use a Current USA.
The affordable one that was out.
Yeah. A Current USA or a Fuval. I'm actually curious. If anyone's on here right now, I want to know whoever started for their first reef light with a Current or like a Fuval reef light. I'm just curious. Let me know. Hit me up in the comment section. I feel like that's a very common light that people start with on their reef tanks.
Now, before I get into these LEDs more in depth, I want you to know whatever light you have, I'm not insulting it at all. I'm just speaking from personal experience on how these lights work. There are a ton. This is where we began the conversation tonight. Was there's so many choices now, and why is it so confusing to choose a light? Because there's just so many of them now. They come in every shape, size, wattage, option. We're going to go over some that we have used and we have gotten the best results with. I have personally used and gotten great results with, and go from there. I'm going to start out with saying that any of the strip lights, like the Currents and the Fuvels, you will have limited success with them. They are not, you bought it and you're done and you're never buying another light, because you can grow anything with them. Honestly, you can't grow everything with them. That's where a lot of the other stuff comes into play, like the AIs and the Kessels and the Radions and the Neptunes and the GHLs, and the list goes on and on and on, because there's honestly so many different LEDs out there.
With those beginner lights, right? So if you're just getting into reefing, a lot of people start with the Currents or the Fools. Ernie was just talking about you're very limited to what you do, but that gets you to play. Think about it. That's when you first saw the first green star polyps, the first mushrooms, these animals starting to actually grow in your tank, and then you wanted to move beyond that, but you just couldn't. You had very little success rate. Either the corals just started slowly bleaching out, or they just weren't making it because they just weren't strong enough to handle that. That's when, after you get to that point, that's when you really play. That's also like the biggest thing at the OSA, especially the whole reason OSA Choice was saying is to give you the best answer, best bang for your buck. That we always push the AIs because that is for what you're paying for and what you're getting and where you're going to start for success rate is for us the best bang for your buck.
And their warranties and their customer service.
Correct.
Step up from the regular ball lights is, it's a generic name. They're called Chinese black boxes. Those things will grow coral like nobody's business. A lot of them have a lot of decent controls on them, but if that thing breaks, just throw it in the garbage. You're not getting a hold of anybody to help you fix that thing. And they're not that much cheaper than, say, an AI. They're really not.
When it comes down to the lights, what would you say is our top three? Like, say, we pretty much stick to 3 lighting systems to go for.
If you want to buy a single light fixture, because a lot of people are like, I don't want to buy 2 or 3 lights to cover this. The Reef Breeders is my go-to on that. They're great lights. Logan has great customer service. He is local. They'll grow just about anything. They're very good lights, and you can get one fixture to cover the entire tank. You got a 4-foot tank, you don't need 2 Hydra 32s. You need one 48-inch Photon V2, and you're good to go. AIs are next, and after that is me personally, and here in the shop are the Radions. I love the Radions. Are you ever going to use every ounce of that light that you're paying $800 a piece for? No, you're not. You're going to use 60% of it tops. That's why I tend to shy people away from the Radions, because they're great lights. They're awesome lights, but you're never going to use them to their full potential. Very few people do. And we're just trying to get you going with the most cost-effective, best working light that there honestly is. Any of these LEDs, if you want to do an SPS tank, in all honesty, you've got to run T5s as well. Otherwise, your SPS is going to bleach out on the bottom because it's not getting any light because it's getting shadowed. And that's just part of the LEDs.
Now, what about spectrums?
We run very heavy blues here because we're more into the coral than the fish. If you really want to get a good view of your fish, I run the white channels in between 15 to 25% for when I'm there looking at the fish. I don't run that all day long because those white spectrums also have red and green in them, which causes algae, and none of us like clean algae. And our corals, they don't look that good under white lights. Do they look good? Yes. Do they glow and make you go, what is this alien creature like they do under the blues? No, they don't. The reds and the greens, I'd say 3 to 5%. They're just there to give you a little more color pop. The reds and the greens are really what makes your algae grow. You can crank those reds up and get some crazy coral pop colors coming out. But you also get some crazy algae growing when you do that, so keep that in mind.
Now, would it matter on the light? Do you feel like different lights have a different spectrum that cause different problems?
Most of them are all adjustable now. That's the thing. There's one out there. Once again, I'm not bad mouthing anything. It's an entire system. It's the BioCube 32 gallon. They upgraded that to an LED system, and you really don't have control over the brightness of those lights. And so those 32-gallon BioCubes have enormous algae problems. I'm just throwing that out there.
The 32-gallon BioCube is one of the most popular tanks at one time, probably ever, because it was really that first all-in-one tank where you bought, besides an all-in-one filtration system, you got the lighting system as well. Now, I remember when the T5 was on it, and that thing was immaculate.
The 29-gallon I loved. It had the compact fluorescence and LED options.
That's what it was.
That was
compact. It was a beast. It really was. It was a great thing. But when they came out with the LED, a lot of those LED lights just weren't strong enough to handle it. And that's actually a problem in life. We see so many people that had the 32. I don't feel like we see it too much anymore because Waterbox really came in and took over. But the old 32-gallon BioCubes, there'd be so many DIYs of someone putting like an AI prime up and over that thing. And that's what I got to tell you.
Pulling the tops off them and throwing AIs on them.
Yeah. And AIs for us have been one of the best, especially when it comes to the primes, and the Hydra 32s have definitely for us been easiest, simple control with Bluetooth ready. Steven, hold on a second. I'm going to read this real quick. Never mind. I missed it. We're trying to – I see you guys' comments coming up on the section. We're going to get to it. We're just kind of starting off right now. But do me a favor, guys. Keep lighting up because I'm curious who out there started with the 32-gallon BioCube. I'm curious what you guys did for those first lights and what lights you're running right now and what lights are your favorite.
One very popular light I have not mentioned yet. If I do a fish-only system – I run Kessels on it because nothing makes your tank look like Kessels do. Kessels give you that. They're the only light out there that give you that metal halide look. They're amazing lights. They're great for keeping coral alive. Once again, I'm not trying to upset anybody. Just from personal experience, the coral growth under Kessels, for me personally, is not the greatest. At home, I run 2 Radions, and I got an A360 plopped right in between them to get the shimmer because I need my metal halide shimmer. I'm old school. I like my metal halide shimmer. I get that from the Kessel. Some people supplement T5s. I supplemented a Kessel because I wanted that shimmer.
Yeah, and we see different shimmers too. I got to tell you, I saw Stephen Bakley just talking about it, the Neptune. Now, I have not run a Neptune New Skies on anything, but I've seen them in person. And that is one of the few lights that I've seen shimmer like the Kessel. I got to tell you, that Kessel shimmer is pretty awesome. For us in store, the best things we've come across that is the AI primes.
I personally have not played with the Neptune Sky yet. This is just me personally. When a company rolls out a new electronic device, I let that thing sit and stew for about a year before I personally get one and play with it. Because there's bugs in these things. They rush them to get them out early, and there's always an issue here, there, somewhere. I let everybody else play with it and figure out what's wrong before I get one and get one that I know is going to work flawlessly, and then I start playing with it. I have heard very good things about the Neptune Sky so far, though.
And that's what it is, too. You guys are going to find out. When you are a DIY hobbyist, you're in there, you're playing. Listen, we're giving you a bunch of information, what works for us and what works for us in the field, and you guys are gonna mess with what works for you. And I've seen some pretty awesome tanks off an AP 700 from Kessel. Everyone has their own different way of making things work. Bob Winfrey said the Red Sea does the shimmer, and I've never used the Red Sea lights.
I have not either personally. They're very similar to the Kessels from what I've seen. Build-wise and everything else, except they're square and the Kessels are round. Otherwise, they look very similar to me, light-wise anyway. Another add-on you can do with the LEDs is Reef Breeders has lumen bars.
Yeah, they look nice.
They have these blue lumen bars that when you put them on your tank, if you thought your corals were popping under blues before, these things make the color explode on them. But you got to be careful how often you run them, because if you run them on a 12-hour schedule with your regular lights, you're honestly just pumping too much light into the tank, and you end up, once again, getting algae issues, which is what we try to avoid at all costs.
I'm going through you guys' comments right now. Actually, while we're talking about this, now since we're on LED lights, and Peter just brought it up, but Alan was just talking about for growing Chaeto in the sump, do you recommend either the AI Fuge or the AI Freshwater, since both grow plants?
I think you're going a little overboard using an AI on a refugium, personally. But if you've got the money for it, I'd go with the Fuge light. Just personally, because the Chaeto is going to be more for that spectrum, whereas the freshwater light is going to grow a bunch of hair algae, once again, in your refugium, which will end up starving out your Chaeto.
Sure.
Any light will honestly grow Chaeto in a refugium.
What do we use at the shop?
We use the Reef Breeder Q2s.
We use a lot of these.
Yeah, all I was using an AI Prime. I just dialed up the reds and the blues on it and made it that pink color, and it worked fine. I did that because I had an extra one. There's not a lot of people out there that want to go out and spend $240 on a refugium light. One of the Neptune lights I do have good experience with is the Neptune Grow. I've had great results from that refugium light. I believe that's around $90.
One of the biggest things I see you guys saying up in the comment section is what we love, especially in the new LEDs, when it comes to the reef tanks, when it comes to the corals, is the way the blues look, right? When we see those corals pop, it looks like a scene out of Avatar. What, Ernie, I had a question. What is your favorite light for the blues? Because I got to tell you, that I got to definitely say, I do love the eco tanks when it comes down to that.
Radion. Radion's got a darker spectrum.
It just does. And that Radion just looks so hot.
The blue is more of an aqua. It's not by any means aqua, but it's not that dark blue you get out of the Radions.
I'm just kind of going through this. So everyone out here, you got guys there. We've all done Chinese boxes, right? We've always done, a lot of guys have done Chinese LEDs. After doing them, I would not do them again because we have so much tech, the same amount of price or just a little bit more money. So for me, it wouldn't do. But back in the day, that was like our only hope. You guys, I don't know if any of you guys remember AI Souls were like the first thing. It was all white or blue, and you were just going to have intensity, and it came with this giant controller you had to hook it up and barely ever hooked up on. But
do you remember how expensive those were?
Yeah, and they worked too, because that was the first time we saw LEDs really work what they did. And now what we have in just a small puck is unbelievable.
Yes.
Alan also says the Red Sea LED blues are the deepest you've seen. So Alan started talking about that. And I've seen Bob Winfrey. Bob Winfrey's pretty happy with them. I have not used the Red Seas. I don't even think I've even seen, maybe on a trade show I've seen the LEDs, but I haven't seen anything like that.
You saw them at the first Keep On Reefing.
Yeah.
They were there.
If you guys got any questions, just hit us on up right here in the comment box. All right, what else? Come on. Fill me in it. Besides the T5s, besides the LEDs, now give me an example. How do I choose what I'm going to pick for my size tank?
That's a tough one, man. Pretty much a 3-foot tank. If we're talking AIs, I'd stick with 2 AI primes. When you get to a 4-foot tank, that's when you jump up to 2 of the Hydra 32s. A 3-foot tank, I've tried one Hydra 32 on, and I didn't get the full coverage out of it, so I did 2 primes, and it covered it perfectly. The 64s, I think the 64s is a kill, because you're putting 4 pucks so close together. I just run I'd add an extra 32 to the mix rather than trying to do 64s. That's just me personally.
Depends on what you're trying to grow too. You know what I'm saying? Like some guys SBS. I feel like honestly LBS is definitely more becoming way bigger with some SPS. You know what I'm saying? A few pieces here. If you're not doing SPS dominant, you go
SPS, you don't even have to worry about the shadowing either. The shadowing is mostly with the SPS stuff. That's mostly where the shadowing comes into play.
And I tell you, I do love some of this gray lights. I also like the fact that when it comes out of the AI, it's the different mounting kits, right? The Hydra 32s, you got those HMS mounts. On the AIs, when it comes down to the primes, they have like a small, I forgot the name of the smaller version of the HMS mount. You have that single steel beam. And then I also like the flex arms. Flex arms for me are the way to go when it comes to the primes because you got the 12 or the 18. I personally love the 18s just because I like how tall they are, how high they are. Some people don't. Some people would rather have them a little bit more closer. But I like the 18s to give that spectrum and the way it looks to get that shimmer. Alan, what are your thoughts on religiously measuring par when placing new corals in the tank versus placing and going with your gut? Do you measure par every time you place a new coral in the tank?
I'm a gut guy. I play with par here and there, and I got worse results trying to match pars up exactly with what the recommended par levels were. It's just, after 30 years, you kind of know where a coral wants to be, and you can tell within 24 hours if it's going to work in that spot or not. Because the par readings, here we go with the internet once again. It's a blessing and a curse. Par readings are all over the place on the internet, and all those par readings are from the SPS guys. There's so few people out there that are running SPS specific tanks. And if you try to set your mixed reef or your LPS or your leather tank up to par readings from an SPS tank, you're going to burn everything. It's a real catch-22. Basically, if you're running radions, run them at 45 to 50%, your par is probably going to be about right for most tank depths. AIs, you're going to be in the 60 to 80% range. Once again, if it's an average tank depth. One of my tanks at home is 3 feet deep. I've got the radions cranked up to 75% on that because there's some deep water to penetrate down through. You'll also drive yourself nuts trying to constantly measure par unless you go out and buy a par meter trying to get your hands on one to constantly measure with. Apex has one that's a constant that stays in your tank, but you got to make sure that lens is cleaned off all the time. Just a slight bit of algae on it throws the readings off completely. And you got to move it all over the place. And it's just, after a while, you can figure it out with your gut.
Bob Winfrey just said if you talk to Tulio, he will tell you all day that par isn't the answer. And if you guys don't know who Tulio is the owner of Reef, right? And one of pretty much the godfather of LEDs in the aquarium industry. Smartest guy, great guy, and everybody knows him. He's the guy who's really kind of advanced, put LEDs on the map, and then they've been advanced from there. Actually, why we guys, before we get into it too, Benjamin Farron, hit that OSA Choice video, guys, just so you guys know, we have all the stuff we're talking about available on our osachoice.com website. Now, Peter just set us up in talking about schedules, and he's totally right. Now, that is probably one of the next biggest thing is schedule of lighting, and that is something that confuses and is scary to some people when they're just getting into it. Ernie, what would you say for schedule for a lighting system on a reef tank? And is it different for a new reef tank versus for a more of established reef tank?
When you just start out, I recommend 8 hours. It helps with, once again, or algae. The less light, the less algae. Your corals are fine under an 8-hour schedule. About 3 months in, you can crank it up to 10 hours. You're eventually going to end up somewhere in that 10 to 12 hour period. It depends on algae growth, how your corals are doing, how close to the equator your coral. We're dealing with corals from all over the world. If a coral comes from close to the equator, it's going to want more of a 12-hour schedule on it. If, say, it comes from the Caribbean, from Florida, it's going to be fine with an 8 to 10 hour. We're taking critters from all over the world and putting them in a little glass box together, and we got to find that happy medium that makes them all happy at the same time, which is a tough thing to do, but time, experience, trial and error, you can figure it out and have an awesome mixed reef tank, which is one of the hardest things to do. A lot of people think a strict SPS tank is the tough one. Doing a successful true mixed reef tank is probably the hardest thing there is to do in this hobby.
Now, we were doing these schedules, and beginning schedule, would you say the light intensity should be lower on a new tank?
Almost all of them have a preset which will ramp up and then ramp down again. That is honestly the way to go. It's like when you're sleeping yourself in bed, the sun slowly comes up through the window, you slowly wake up and you get on with your day. Somebody comes in the room, turns all the lights on, you jump up and you're like, ah! Your corals, they don't want to do that. So do a slow ramp up, slow ramp down. Most of these have lunar settings, so you can look at them at night. Just make sure that they're not on too bright. Another thing you got to be careful with the lunar settings is everyone thinks coral spawning is a good thing in your aquarium. It's a cool thing to have happen in your aquarium, but it can also, in worst case scenario, it can crash your tank. If eggs and sperm and everything get released into your water column, which the lunar cycle triggers corals to spawn. So you need to be careful with the lunar settings. It's usually fine because it usually doesn't happen, but clams especially. If clams spawn in your tank, you've got a big, big problem on your hands.
Joshua just said, what percentage would you run for the blues on a mixed reef with 2 AI 16s?
All the blue channels in between 65 and 80, pretty much. And the whites are in between 15 and 20. Reds and greens, 3 to 5. UV usually run around 25 to 30.
Alan also hit us up with, would you consider using the moonlight feature on LEDs lightings, and do you feel like it affects the corals, or does it prevent the fish from sleeping?
A lot of fish don't even sleep. It is going to affect the corals, like I just said about the spawning, but some fish don't even sleep. They're up all night whether the lights are on or off. It doesn't matter. It depends on where they come from. If they want to go to sleep and the lights bother them, they'll just go in a cave, or if it's a wrasse, it'll bury in the sand.
That's pretty good. It's pretty good. So the biggest thing is when we get into it, so I got a new tank. We got the tank up and running. I say if it's like a water box. I got a question. It's going to sound crazy. Do you think it matters for a light schedule versus an all-in-one versus a tank with a sump?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I would say things. We've had awesome success. If you guys could see our 50.3 that's at the shop right now, it's an all-in-one tank. It's just surrounded by 2 A primes, and it's just a mixed tank. And that tank has broken every rule that we always tell everybody for a new tank. It's done unbelievable. And I just
that tank has me flabbergasted. I don't understand why it's doing so well. I'm happy it is, but I can't figure out why it's doing so well.
It just worked like a dream. And then you get some other tanks that just don't. And then it also comes down to like your water sources and things like that. But just make sure when you get into them, just don't blast those new corals. And say if I was getting a new coral, right? Do you suggest someone get a new coral, putting it at the bottom of the tank and slowly raising it up? Or do you feel like, you know what, just put it right in place?
If you're running a similar light schedule, or not schedule, but intensity to the store that you get it from, you can usually put it in place. But most people don't know what that store's light intensities are. I always start them out in the sand bed and slowly move them up just to be on the safe side. One thing, if you're running a fish-only tank, Fish don't need light. People think the light's there for the fish. If it's a fish only, the light is there for you. If you work all day long and you're home in the morning, looking at the tank, drinking your coffee, and at home at night, eating your dinner, looking at the tank, you can have those lights off during the day. Most of these fish come from 50, 60, 70 feet down. It's dark down there. They don't need the lights. It'll save you on cleaning algae in your tank. It'll save you on your electric bill. Have the lights on when you're home. Then you can enjoy it. When you're not home, you save some electricity, less cleaning.
Hit you up with, in the terms of scheduling, do you want to schedule in sync with the sun schedule outside, or does it not matter? Do you just adjust the schedule according to the season?
You can do that 8 to 12 hours whenever you want.
Yeah, you could even, and we see people that are like that. We see some people that work third shift and they want the lights on during their time. And that you can totally do that. You just got to base the tank on that. Yep. The biggest thing is, you just don't want direct sunlight on an aquarium. Direct sunlight is like the worst. And that's why all the stores are just blacked out.
We don't want indirect sunlight on them.
Yeah.
It looks cool. It really does look cool when those rays of sunshine shine through. But once again, algae issues.
Diatoms, all those problems. That's what comes with that.
And
that's
heat.
why I love UV sterilizers. James. What about anemones in your fish-only tank? It's not just fish-only.
If there's anemones in it, it's not a fish-only tank.
That's true. So it's technically an nem tank.
Anemones do need light.
Anemones definitely need light.
They need just as much light as corals do, in all honesty. Certain corals you can get away with not a lot of light, like mushrooms and stuff like that. They don't need a whole heck of a lot of light. Non-photosynthetics don't need any light at all, but you got to feed them constantly. So
that's actually the animal that a lot of people get when they have like the fluval or the current. They try the beginner light. They get a nem, and the nem just starts shrinking and it starts like getting pale, and then that's when they realize they have a problem that the light intensity is not strong enough. And I gotta tell you the truth, this is something I don't really talk about, but I'll talk about it in other things. God, I'm gonna open Pandora's box on this. There is like no regulations in this industry, right? I can write on any box. You know what? I'm grabbing one, okay? This is the only thing I do not like. And this is like one of the biggest problems. And anyone who's ever started a tank knows this, okay? Now, you have great companies. Like, I can tell you right now, right? Castle, Reef Breeders, Ecotech, AI. I could go on and on, you know, and there's other companies. But you just know are good quality and are there for you to help you out. I mean, anybody who's on there who's ever watched the BRS series, those guys have done a fantastic job. But one of the things is, even, I'm talking about freshwater side, saltwater side, or anything like that. Anybody can write what they want on a box, right? So even on some lighting company, some random light can say rated for saltwater, corals, and everything else. But it doesn't mean anything. And I know that sounds terrible, but they can legit do that. There's nothing.
I didn't want to bring that up tonight. I left the box out on the floor, actually, because it's a light. It's a regular old bar light. And it says designed for saltwater, corals, or fresh water. And it's an on-off light. It's got 3 different LEDs in it, and that's it. Freshwater spectrum and saltwater spectrum are 2 totally different animals. Therefore, that light cannot be designed for all of that stuff. But it says it is.
It says right on the box. And you know what? That's not anyone's fault for buying that. Because honestly, they go out, they buy it, because guess what? That's what it says. I'm buying what I was told to do. And then you have so many people that come in and like, oh, I have a tank ready for saltwater corals. I have a light that can handle that. We can talk about things like that. And that is one of the biggest problems out there. They can just say whatever they want. Filtration systems. Now, I'm just using this brand because in general, I really like this filter. It's a great filter and everything else. But you'll see on some of these tanks, these filters that say that they can power this tank when they clearly cannot do it. They can't. When they're gonna power that one tank for that size tank for one fish, they can just rate whatever you want. And I could go on. And that's why I talk about all the time with people that get starter kits, right? These cheap starter kits from Petco or PetSmart. And I talk about that all the time. Is that filtration system is never going to handle anything you want out of that tank. You might as well just take the filter, throw it out and go buy the next one because it's just never going to work for you. And that's what it is. And I hate to say it, that's the same thing with the lights. But the greatest part is that there's so many people. If you're even here watching this, you've already hit the point where you've done so much research. You've been hanging out. You're in the scene where you're just having fun and you're enjoying it and you love this with a hobby, with a passion that you've already learned to this step. But think about all those people that are out there that buy these lights and they're set up for failure and they never make it past anywhere because they never had a chance. I will go into that rant forever. I'm sorry.
I had no idea that light even said that on the box. We carry it because it's a great light for growing freshwater plants. I had no idea it said for saltwater and corals on it until I was reading it tonight.
Yeah. Alan hits you up another one. Are rock flower anemones sensitive to light as much as they are sensitive to flow?
They like being at the bottom of the tank. They're not very light demanding. They don't like much light. They don't like much flow. They're in between, they're called an anemone. They're in between an anemone and a mushroom. A mushroom is at the very bottom, basically, of the anemone family. The rock flower is in between that. They don't sting. They tend not to move. Very easy to take care of.
Alan's on fire tonight. I want to get another one versus Team Tapper. I can't even do it. But Alan, when do you adjust the entire lighting intensity versus moving the coral to the appropriate location? That's actually a really great question. Did you get that already?
If you change the entire lighting intensity, you're screwing everything up for everything else that's in the tank.
Yes. And then sometimes
we can't grow every coral in our tank. You need to keep that in mind. It's amazing that we can do what we can do. Some corals just aren't going to work for you, and you have to be like, all right, I can't do this one. For me, it's candy cane corals. I've never been able to keep a trumpet coral alive my entire life. I can grow agros like nobody's business. Anything else, I can't do a candy cane coral.
You're going to have some corals that aren't going to work too. You just have to accept that because there's other type of corals you have in there. Remember, you got chemical warfare going on. You have all these other issues. So this is just some corals they're going to battle against each other. So you're going to pick and choose, and you're going to find just some corals don't do well in your tank, and you'll try again and again and again
and again and again.
And
same with fish. Some fish are just never going to work in your system.
So that's just it. Guys, anything else? We're getting out of here soon. Anything else you want to
get out of here, Mr. Freshwater? Bring up how the LEDs have changed in freshwater as well, because they've been.
Oh, I wasn't gonna bring up freshwater tonight. I was trying.
Well, we've been talking a lot of AIs and Ecotech, and they both have some killer freshwater LEDs out there.
They do. So I do like the fluval freshwater plant lights. I like what I'm basing on tanks on is right. Where even Dean Tapper just set it up. He said, what did he say? Plastic versus real on the freshwater side, right? So pick and choose your battle. But what I care about, for me, I like fish, right? I love fish. If I'm doing Africans, I want the right light. And actually, Dean and Roger were the ones that were showing me this. I like the fluval LEDs for the plant lights, actually for just fish. They bring out fantastic colors. I like the timing. I like the Bluetooth app. It's a really good light for what you're paying for, right? The best bang for your buck. It's a good light for the bang for your buck. Now, we use a lot of Phoenixes just for a great on and off light. There's even more advances, like the Monster Ray has a nice red stripe. That looks great on Africans, really brings out those in colors. AIs, yet again, the primes. The freshwater prime is probably my absolute favorite light when it comes to freshwater because the intensity, the control in it, having all the accessibilities from my cell phone, being able to do what I want is, and the way they look. We've built all three locations, Coventry, freshwater, like all the display tanks, Seekonk, all the display tanks, Wakefield, all the display tanks with those freshwater primes. And they're for what you're paying for what you're getting, I think they are fantastic. But if I'm going to do a tank, remember, we're doing a lot of open tops. We do a lot of water boxes, all sorts of that clear series. But if I was going to do a tank with a canopy, now I would either do the Fluval 3, the 3.0, the Planet Series for lights. And I got to tell you, I really like which ones are those? The Lumi lights, those are actually Tulio's lights. Those are awesome for freshwater fish. You want like a strip bar that just looks insane, that's adjustable. That light by a Reef light is awesome. And I know this is crazy, but freshwater has come so far in advance. We're moving so far with freshwater. We're going to be at the same page we are in saltwater just in a couple of years. And you guys are seeing it. Anyone that follows any of the bigger players that are out there, what's going on overseas? I'm highly inspired by multiple guys, and I just love where it's going.
Why do you have to choose between plastic and real? I've been doing both lately at home.
Yeah, so
I've been mixing them together.
I got to tell you,
Plants are a pain in the butt to take care of. There's some really realistic looking fake red plants out there, so I've been mixing those in with my live green plants, and everything is just fine. I mean,
Stephen Blakely, it just hits me right up so much. Yes, we know. Peter saw that too. He grabbed that right up out of you for you, Bob Winfrey. Don't even worry. I don't know. I love this, and I love everything about it, and I just want to keep moving forward with it, and even the fresh water. So, like, when he's talking about the plants, right? I like artificial when it comes down to African cichlids, because I tell you, the artificial plants that are out there are not your mom and pop's artificial plants. They're not the old school plants. They look insane. So many people come up to me